You're listening to the Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Gulseth.
It is Tuesday, May 7th, and lots of good stuff this week. National Teacher Appreciation Week, Nurse Appreciation Week, and Director of Urban and Inner City Mission and Church Planning Appreciation Week as well.
I think so. Why not?
The Reverend Dr. Steve Schave in studio today, and fellow runner at the Christian Friends of New Americans 5K this weekend.
Facebook proof.
Oh, there is Facebook proof that this guy was booking it, man. I looked down at my watch. I was like, this guy's doing a 7-minute mile, and then he passes me. So it's like he's doing less than a 7-minute mile. This is like super fast.
I realize I need to add sprinting to my fitness because I was hurting. That was a missing link.
Speed training is good for you.
It was a good event too. I mean, it was nice to be out there and to see. It was a beautiful day, and to see the Christian Friends of New Americans, the refugees who have come to the U.S. and found friends in many Christians here in the St. Louis area, ready to support them and welcome them. You headed to D.C. not too long ago.
Correct.
Tell us about what you were participating in this. It was a conference, a summit. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think you could call it a summit. It was basically putting a bunch of stakeholders together in a room to say, we have a massive problem, and none of us can do this alone, but how can we work together across the spectrum to make a difference in this opioid epidemic?
So who was there, and what did you, are there like secrets you can't share? I don't know. You're in DC. What did you discuss? Yeah, right.
So the people that were there represented kind of local governments, especially city leaders, but then also many faith-based organizations that are already working in the opioid crisis and have recovery programs and different parts and pieces that go into the bigger picture of how to make a difference. So it was a gathering of these like minds, again, to find out how does the local city government work well with their faith-based organizations.
So what were you able to bring to that with your background and with what the LCMS is doing with Urban Inner City Mission? Yeah,
it was kind of interesting how it even worked out. We got an email basically from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services on behalf of the Surgeon General saying we're putting together a summit. We're looking for faith-based organizations. The email made its way to me kind of through the channel, and it was this interesting.
Forward.
Yeah. It's like, hey, is this you? Is this you? Is this you? And then it's like, oh, heck. Yeah. So we get to me, and I saw that it was specific. I mean, it was so specific. It was specific about not only the opioid epidemic, but how does workforce development play into the recovery process?
Wow.
And so I actually got a call from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, talked about what we have going on in Urban and Inner City Mission, and we have a specific program, and we're one of maybe a few, if any, national bodies. I mean, there's local places that are doing things in their own areas, but to have a national initiative to actually be about workforce development and job readiness, and part of that being to help people that are in poverty and addiction, have mental health issues, whatever it is that puts them kind of in that gap in terms of employment. So they were super excited that they found a church body that actually has a national initiative, and just talking to me, and they picked up on my passion and compassion for people that are suffering from the opioid epidemic and poverty and the like. So anyways, it was just kind of neat how it all played itself out. But that's what we brought to the table.
How real is the opioid epidemic in the U.S.? I mean, I feel like we may not really fully grasp just how big of an issue this is.
I mean, it's kind of like how we do things today with our media. We just overhype everything. You cannot overhype the opioid epidemic enough. It really is to the point of being a national crisis as much as anything else that ails us as a nation. There's so many factors that go into that, but just suffice it to say, when the Surgeon General is talking about his own brother being affected by this, and the need for us to get past the stigma that happens with people that fall into this, because every single walk of life, rural, small town, rich, poor, I don't think probably any family in America isn't somehow affected by this, by somebody that they're close to.
Absolutely.
athletes all the time, good people, strong people, you name it, all walks of life. But once, they get into the maybe painkillers or whatever it is, it just takes this downward spiral. And kind of being the urban inner city guy, that happens. I get the calls from the city pastors that it's the first time that they had a heroin addict that overdosed in their bathroom and died in the church property. Wow. And they're just devastated by this. But it's way too common. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. The heartbreaking stories of young athletes who, they had an injury, they were prescribed something, and then, you're addicted.
I hear it over and over. Lives just completely destroyed, all beginning with just some sort of an injury.
Yeah. Yep. What do we bring to the table as Lutherans that sets us apart with our understanding of witness and mercy, and our understanding of the gospel and bringing Christ's love to people?
Yeah, so certainly for us, witness is always at the center, and the altar and the pulpit and the font are kind of the anchors of any kind of work we do, and wanting to tell people this good news. That's the one thing that will truly transform. That's the one thing that people need to cling to, especially when they're recovering from addiction. But I think us as Lutherans, one of our greatest strengths is our sanctity for human life. Every single life, whether it's that bag lady suffering from mental illness, or if it's the panhandler, who's got a drug addiction problem, we understand the sanctity of that life. We understand the theology of the cross and the hiddenness in our suffering, and so we can see in others that this is the apple of God's eye. This is a soul that Christ himself, the Son of God, was sent to save. And I think that's one of the greatest strengths that we have, is that we understand this compassion, because we realize in ourselves we are poor, miserable sinners. We are beggars before God. We have nothing to offer. We have no strength in ourselves. And on the other hand, we see even in the least of the least that this truly is one that God loves. This is his lost coin. This is his lost sheep. And so I think just from a theological perspective, I think we have so much to offer in terms of understanding who people are in God's eyes.
That speaks to me, that it speaks volumes. That's so different than, a few decades ago. Well, maybe it's more than a few now, when we saw the rise of the social gospel, that the gospel is really about getting yourself cleaned up so that you can be a better person, so you can be better before God. You can be, make that distinction for us. How is this so different than the social gospel that we heard a couple of decades ago, and we still see remnants of it?
Yeah, I think we have a good understanding of the two kingdoms, and part of that is our understanding of the doctrine of vocation, and that this is a first article gift, and there are going to be people who fall into that gap where, there's a strong economy and jobs are on the uptick, and yet at the same time, because of their circumstance, they're kind of caught in this cycle of hopelessness. And so we understand that even in Matthew 25, when Jesus talks about the vineyard owner, and he walks up to these guys standing around in the marketplace and says, "Why are you guys standing around idle?" It wasn't, Proverbs speaks a lot about sloth, and sloth brings poverty and hunger, and it's not a good thing. We understand that from a long gospel perspective. But on the other hand, when the owner walks up and says, "Why are you guys just standing around idle?" It's because nobody's hired them. And there are people that are in that situation that no one will hire them, whether they're getting out of prison or they're in this cycle of hopelessness because their circumstances keep them from getting work. They're just kind of stuck in that loop. So when we do this, to answer your question, Andy, we think of this kind of in the first article and also the left-hand kingdom, that this is connected to the gospel. It is how we show mercy and compassion. Luther describes when it says, "Thou shalt not kill," that includes if there is a way that we can help somebody. We as Christians have a responsibility for this. And it's not just simply enough for us to go and to do this good work and say that this is it, and I think that's what was so lacking in the social gospel, is it's basically, okay, we've helped that person, now we've told them the good news. No. We understand that this needs to be connected to the word and sacrament, to the church. I think that's what is so different. We don't say it's enough to be fed. we say you need your spiritual food. It's not enough to have your home. You need to have your eternal spiritual home. That's what distincts.
That is, that's, wow. I feel like we need 2 more hours to really hash that out.
I think we need a part 2 of this one.
Right, we do. And I think that, there was a great story in the Reporter on this, and one of the ways that a congregation in Cincinnati is doing this as well. I think we need to share that story as well. And thanks to our friends over at the Reporter, the LCMS Reporter, for sharing those great stories. It's just outstanding. But I think this also speaks volumes to why we as a church need to be at the table at summits like this too, because it's not social gospel.
When the Surgeon General himself is inviting you in, that says something.
The Reverend Dr. Steve Schave, Director in Urban and Inner City Mission and Church Planning for the LCMS Office of National Mission. Thanks so much for being our guest on the Coffee Hour today.
Thank you.
I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Golseth.
The Coffee Hour with Andy and Sarah is a production of KFUO. To support the Coffee Hour and KFUO Radio, visit KFUO.org. You can also text KFUO to 41444 or send an email to gifts@KFUO.org. And you can call us at 800-844-0524. KFUO. Christ for you, anytime, anywhere.